Hi, I'm Casey.
Hi, I'm Rafael.
It's
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So I got my BA in philosophy here at Duquesne, and then I just started at the law school.
How is transitioning from the undergraduate program at Duquesne into the law school?
So the philosophy program here at Duquesne prepared me especially well to go to law school. That's because philosophy teaches you a lot of writing, a lot of analytical thinking, critical thinking, and it gives you good practice in the amount of reading you'll have to do in law school. So the transition for me wasn't too rough, but that's why philosophy is a really good major to have going into law school. As far as specific courses to take, philosophy of logic is great for preparing for your LSAT specifically, but other than that, and it's because it teaches you how to walk through the logic games. You're learning like logical fallacies and the ways to make correct arguments, which is a section on your LSAT. But other than that, any philosophy class is going to be really good at preparing you for law school. So there are kind of three things that I think philosophy teaches you really well, and the first is how to write well. And in your first year of law school, you'll be required to take, it's called legal research and writing. And to put a plug in for Duquesne Law, we were just ranked 14th in the country in our writing program, which is great. So it is a challenging program, but philosophy will prepare you for that because you will write a ton of papers and you'll get good at writing. And then further than just even the writing course itself, all of your exams. So like you'll have one final exam at the end of your course, and that'll be your entire grade. And the majority of your points are going to come from a really long essay. So even if you understand the information of the class really well, you need to be able to articulate it in a time crunch in a way that your professor understands what you're saying. And so you need to be a good writer. And philosophy is a good background for that. And then also thinking critically, thinking analytically, and working through arguments is really important. And that's what you do in philosophy. You read someone's argument, what they think about something, often like abstract concepts. So you really have to parse through it, and you have to be able to relate it to other arguments and figure out how they differ, if you agree with them or not. And that kind of analytical thinking is exactly what you have to do in law school.
Now that you went through those philosophy courses and gained those skills, do you feel more prepared than some of your peers in the law school?
So there are everyone at the law school is incredibly smart, and not to trash like science majors or anything, because they're obviously doing very well also, but they had to learn how to, or just get better or more comfortable writing and reading a lot, because most of their stuff was science related. So I think the humanities in general and philosophy especially are really helpful for that. And also just the amount of reading you have to do. You'll get probably 50 pages per subject per week. And so being able to read not only effectively, but managing the amount of reading you have to do is something that takes people a lot to transition to. And so philosophy is helpful for that as well. And then as far as specific courses to take, I think a lot of people think that you need to focus in on philosophy courses that are specific to the law, like philosophy of law or political philosophy, and those are helpful. I took those as well, but I think people forget that just any philosophy course, any challenging philosophy course that you can take through the arguments that were being made, and a lot of the times things weren't written in a straightforward way, and that was super helpful. So any challenging philosophy class is going to be really helpful. And I would suggest, I don't know if all of the humanities allow you to do this, or if it's just philosophy, but they will cross-list graduate courses into the undergraduate level, and those are going to be really challenging courses, and taking them with graduate students is going to prepare you really well as well, because you're going to be in law school with students of all ages and all different backgrounds, and any way that you can diversify yourself in the classroom is going to be helpful.
What specific areas of philosophy do you think prepared you a lot more for law school?
Yeah, so I took a pretty wide range of philosophy classes. Like I said, I did take philosophy of law and philosophy of logic, political philosophy. Those are all good. I took ancient philosophy with Professor Aronson, and I took modern philosophy with Dr. Bates. Those are always really helpful. I took epistemology, which was challenging, so that one was helpful too. I don't think the area specifically is what's going to, change whether or not it's helpful. I think any philosophy class is going to be helpful, but I think the best classes are going to be the ones that challenge you to read something that you've never read before, that maybe isn't totally straightforward, that you really have to struggle to understand. And then classes that have a good discussion, which all philosophy classes have a lot of discussion in them. But yeah, but that's helpful. Being able to not only like read it and understand it, but to be able to talk about it and, you know, maybe even argue with other people about what your interpretation of that is, because there's a lot of that in the law, obviously. Not arguing, but, you know, reading, parsing through statutes, trying to decide what you think the person who wrote that meant and what that, like, what the implications are for that and how you apply it to like real life situations is especially helpful. Also, any philosophy that you're interested in is always going to be good because you're going to pay attention, you're going to enjoy it, and then you'll be able to take it with you moving forward. And then outside of philosophy classes, another course that I took as an undergrad that was helpful for preparing for the LSAT specifically was, I think it's called Creative Problem Solving Math.
Okay.
So I'm not a huge fan of math, and I had to take one, and that one sounded easy. But it actually ended up being really helpful for the logic games that you have to do on your LSAT. So are you familiar with what the logic game section is like?
I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, so they're kind of like puzzles. They give you like a factional scenario, and you kind of have to figure out like either like a sequence or an order, whatever that could come from that scenario. And that class was really helpful for like teaching you how to organize that kind of information. They're not typical math problems, so that was a good class. And like I said, philosophy of logic is really helpful. I would take that as close to when you want to take your LSAT as possible. So I took my LSAT, I think, in the June following my junior year of undergrad, which is super early. You don't have to take it that early, but you want to take it early enough to give yourself time to take it again if you need to, but not so early that you're like stressed out doing it, you know, before you need to. But taking that class as close to when you take the LSAT as possible, so probably the spring before you take your LSAT that summer would be helpful, just so that you don't forget it and it's fresh in your mind. So I think that logic, philosophy of logic, and the creative problem solving math are helpful, and you want to take those as close to when you're taking your LSAT as possible. So usually the spring of whatever your junior year prior to that summer. And also business courses are kind of helpful because there's a little bit of that in your first year, contracts and property. You'll get a nice background in that that way when you go in there, it won't be something you've never heard before.
Do you think ethics played any ethics courses played part in the logic? So
I did take philosophical ethics with Professor Aronson my first year, and that was a really cool course. It was very discussion based, and you kind of got to put your opinion into it because it was ethics, so that was really cool. And I took an English course. It was called Shakespeare and Ethics. That was it was half Shakespeare, half philosophy, like ethics, and we kind of read them through the lens of Shakespeare, and that was a really cool course as well. That was a really challenging course, and also because it was English, it was heavy in writing, so you can do that as well. Do you have any other questions? Sorry.
Are there any other philosophy majors in some of your classes in the law school?
Yeah, there's actually another Duquesne graduate. His name is Jake. He is in the law school as well. And I think there's probably 3 or 4 other students who were either philosophy minors or majors who have come to law school. A lot of people end up doing poli-sci, which is helpful as well. But like I said, I did philosophy. I found it really helpful. So I think that that's a good path to take.
I think one thing that's interesting is how a lot of people assume that political science is like the best way, the best major to take to go into law school. And do they really tell you that there's other majors you can take?
Yeah, so, I mean, political science is helpful because it's one of the humanities. It'll be heavy in reading and writing as well. But I think people assume that because the subject matters are kind of the same that it will be helpful. But you're not really learning, until like maybe constitutional law, because that's directly related to politics. I don't think that it's particularly helpful, like in more than any other major. Your first year, at least at Duquesne, your first year classes are going to be contracts, property, your legal research and writing course, torts, and civil procedure. And those aren't any more or less connected to political science than economics, math. So I think that people are hesitant to choose philosophy because they think it's totally unrelated. But for the most part, none of the majors you're going to get in undergrad are really that related to what you're going to learn. It's going to be new subject matter regardless.
It seems like a misconception that philosophy can't be used.
Right. No, and it's super helpful. And it's also, it prepares you well for your LSAT. And so you can end up getting a really good LSAT score because of your philosophy major, which is good. And also, this is slightly a new topic, but law schools used to be very strict in the numbers you needed to get to go to law school. You needed a specific LSAT score and you needed a specific GPA, and those were the only two things that people thought they considered. But I think the application process has become a lot more holistic. Not that those numbers definitely matter. You need a good GPA and you need a good LSAT score, but they want to know like who you are as a person, like what your interests are, because they want people who are diverse, so that there is a diverse background of people in the classroom, because then you can learn from one another.
Interesting.
Yeah, so your admission statement should reflect that. Also, your extracurricular activities, any volunteer activities you do, all of the stuff you do as a person outside of school is also really important. And I think people kind of downplay that in the application process. And Duquesne specifically looks at that a lot. And you know that from going here, but that will help you when you're applying here.
I'm taking an intro to law class in the law school, and the professors were really friendly and helpful. Are most of your professors like that?
Yeah. So that's also a misconception of law school, is that your professors, they talk about the Socratic method, which they do use. You will get cold called in class, but it's not to be mean or to scare you or to embarrass you in front of everyone. They call on you because, like philosophy, they want it to be as interactive as possible. And unless you're getting called on and you're forced to walk through a case and explain it, you're not really going to be paying attention or understanding the case as well as you would be if you were called on. And so your professors, they will do that, but it's not supposed to be intimidating. They're also great at being available outside of class, as your undergraduate professors are, I'm sure. They all really care. They want you to do well. They're all invested in that. And so anything they can do to help you they'll do that for you. There's also a lot of opportunities to kind of meet with your professors, like outside of being in class. So you'll see them walking around. PILA, which is the Public Interest Law Association at Duquesne, also does an auction where the professors, they essentially give the auction like an event that they're going to do. So our torts professor took students axe throwing. And then you bid on the activity. Yeah, so you'll get to know them pretty well outside of class as well. You know, you'll meet them socially, and there's also a lot of great networking events that you'll be with your professors at. So your professors in law school are going to be obviously your professors, but you're going to get to know them personally as well, and that'll help you in your career too.
Are you thinking of any internships coming up?
Yeah, so my internship this summer is a little unorthodox. There's a lawyer, he's in Southside, his name's Paul Jubis, and he does wrongful convictions. So I'll be doing that with him. He's the only lawyer who works, he just is a sole practitioner by himself. And he's got 3 cases out of Philly right now that he's working on, so I'll be doing that with him when I get back from Ireland, which is also a great opportunity. There's 2 study abroad. Yeah, 2 study abroad opportunities. They usually do Beijing, China, and then Ireland. The Beijing trip isn't happening this year, but the Ireland trip is, and that's a great opportunity as well. And our professors are the ones who take us. So, yeah.
It's very cool. Mm-hmm. So what made you continue your education here at Pittsburgh, or specifically Duquesne Philosophy?
Yeah, so I obviously spent 4 years here in undergrad. I moved here from about an hour and a half away, so Pittsburgh isn't super far, which is part of the reason I picked it. But also, Duquesne has a great alumni base in the city, especially the law school. It's really funny. They tell you to wear your class ring to interviews because the minute they see that, they're like, "Oh, you're a Duquesne," and I don't know if you've heard the term double duker, but people throw that around. If you go to Duquesne twice, you become a double duker, and it's like this club, and everybody talks. Okay. You know, you went to Duquesne twice. It kind of, you have some camaraderie with the people who have also done that. But I picked Duquesne among a bunch of other schools for a variety of reasons. Duquesne is generous with their scholarships, especially if you went here undergrad. They gave me a full ride, which is, thank God. They support their undergrads, and they bring in people from a ton of different universities, and they end up staying in the city because Duquesne has such a broad alumni network. And they also, you're so close to downtown, so internships are super easy. They also bring a lot of the employers onto campus to interview with you, and the career services office is great. They do an awesome job of hosting events. They're called Lawyers on Location. So once a month, they pick a law firm somewhere close to the city, and they take a group of students down there to meet and network with the lawyers. They have networking events on campus all the time, and even though it can be stressful to balance that with classwork sometimes, you should absolutely do it. It's a great way to meet people, and you end up getting your internships that way. So Duquesne is great.
Have you considered staying in the city to practice law?
Yeah. So I will probably try and stay in the city to practice law. You take your bar when you graduate your third year, and most students at Duquesne have their jobs prior to even taking the bar. There's an on-campus recruiting process program where they bring employers to you actually this summer prior to going into your 2L, and they'll hire you for after your third year. And so a lot of people know going in that they'll be here for a while. There's so many jobs in the city and doing a variety of things. And I love Pittsburgh, so I don't plan on leaving. But
I do too.
yeah. But yeah, so if you want to stay in Pittsburgh, Duquesne's great because this is where all of our alumni are.